A lot of YouTubers have been talking about Assassin's Creed codename Empire, but they rarely ever give any sort of credible primary sources like we learned in school. The primary source, what started this entire thing. Everyone's talking about the codename of Empire. Maybe it could mean the Ottoman Empire. Maybe it means the Roman Empire. What could it mean? And it's driven me crazy because there's an actual source that this all started from. And if that source is accurate, possibly they told us more about the series that isn't being discussed, that has just been blindly overlooked. So that's what I did. I went back to the beginning of this entire Ubisoft fiasco with Assassin's Creed and codename Empire, the project that they are supposedly working on right now. And I found it. I found the source, and I will tell you all about it. You can take it or leave it after I provide you the information therein. And there is some interesting stuff in here that I have not heard discussed, which I think is important. So let's get all of this out there. Let's just throw it out there. First things first, this all started January 4th of 2016, early January. Essentially a a 4chan poster. They went on there and they claimed to be an employee for Ubisoft Montreal, specifically saying that they had intimate knowledge of the Assassin's Creed development cycle, design strategies, and all of that. Which is significant because Ubisoft Montreal is a company that currently stands at about 3,000 or so employees. It's huge. So he says he's specifically working on Assassin's Creed. Now, he went on this 4chan thread and basically did a Q&A saying, ask me anything, I'll tell you, and then you can come back after E3, after all of this stuff I've said will have come true, and you can see that I was telling the truth. And sure enough, practically everything he predicted came true. He said Ubisoft would not bring Assassin's Creed, a new Assassin's Creed, to E3 2016. And he was right. Now, that could be just thrown out there, which we'll come back to. But he did predict that correctly. So that's good on him. Now, he goes on and he says all of this stuff. He says that Black Flag was the main inspiration and that they assigned many of the same developers to this new game that had worked on Assassin's Creed Black Flag, the fourth one, which would be very encouraging because a lot of people find that to be one of the best, if not the best game in this series. But that, of course, is completely conjecture. Now, he is not the one that coined the term Assassin's Creed Empire. That's important to distinguish. What he established is that the game was set in Egypt, and he said that the protagonist was going to be a former slave or a current slave, and then you kind of break out. He says specifically, quote, you play as a slave or ex-slave. He looks a lot like Altair, but with darker skin, and he's a nobody that barely speaks throughout the entire game. So he's mainly a vessel for you to kind of project yourself onto, and you play how you want. He says that the game is incredibly colorful, that the game is almost single-handedly the reason that Prince of Persia as a series was canned and shelved, because Prince of Persia required paying royalties, and it wasn't their own IP, so Ubisoft decided to basically just do an Assassin's Creed, but in the style of a Prince of Persia game, kind of meshing the two together. So he talks about that. He says the world is made from scratch, no recycling. The only recycling is animation, and even then, this one will change most of it. That's very ominous, but I don't know what he could mean. Maybe there's new fighting styles, fighting mechanics. I don't know. But he says as far as recycling goes, this game will have the least amount of it compared to past Assassin's Creed, which is encouraging. He goes on and he talks about technical specs. He talks about naval combat, saying it's not going to be a super crucial element of the game. It's, if there at all, it's primarily going to be a purely means of navigation to sail your boat from place to place, primarily because you would need gunpowder and all of that for cannons, and to just board ships, it wouldn't be the same. So he said they dodged that. Now he goes on, he says they chose to go to Egypt specifically because they wanted freedom from historical accuracy, essentially. In other words, the games in the past had been so just constrained by having to make sure that everything was historically accurate, at least as much as they could do it. And as a result, they ended up getting kind of stranglehold, and they felt compelled to do this. They didn't feel like they had complete freedom. And this game, set in ancient Egypt, allows them to go to a setting where there isn't much known about it. So they can really take liberties, say whatever they want, do whatever they want, have your character do whatever they want. And it's like, who are you to say that's historically inaccurate? It's all just ruins. You can't say that this building wasn't this high because you don't know. You weren't there. So it allows them a lot more freedom, which makes sense, honestly. In an Assassin's Creed game, that makes sense that they would want more freedom, specifically. Now, he says the original game included Greece, which you can travel to, but it was actually cut from the game due to scale issues. So in other words, basically it made the game too big and it was going to be too much work. They decided to go a little smaller and stick with what they were sure that they could accomplish. He says, so the naval side of the game is now a little up in the air. There are talks about making a trilogy of this game with the same character, so they might explore Greece and Rome next. Essentially do what they weren't able to do, or cut it from this game, do it in a sequel. So you could end up with a trilogy with this same protagonist, which would be very compelling, especially if they're going ancient Egypt, you sailed to Greece, and then you sailed to Rome in the next game. Could be really, really interesting. Now, he says other stuff like co-op has been completely cut. He mentions that at that time, the game wasn't even in alpha yet, which is important because the Ubisoft's, I believe it was chief financial officer, said that they weren't interested in releasing a game until alpha was hit as a stage of development a year before their potential release, which would mean that in order for the game to come out this fall, they would have had to hit alpha sometime in the fall of 2016, which does line up with this timeline, which is encouraging to say the least. Now, all of this is completely unverified. I'm sure he's sitting there screaming, Lukey Poo, what are you talking about? This guy's just pulling stuff out of his butt. He's probably a 400-pound, 35-year-old man who's never touched a woman, who's just typing stuff on his computer to make himself feel better. That's possible. It certainly is. However, Kotaku.com, an online gaming journal, got involved. Now, why is this important? Why is it important that it's Kotaku? Well, Kotaku specifically has an incredible track record with the Assassin's Creed franchise, so much so that I could do another video on it entirely. Main point being, they have sources which have time and time again proven that they have inner knowledge and intimate knowledge of what's going on in the Assassin's Creed world and franchise development, all of that. So, on the at 2:21 p.m. on January 4th of 2016, is basically the afternoon of this 4chan post. A journalist by the name of Jason Schreier wrote an article on Kotaku, and he corroborated this. He said, this guy's, everyone I'm talking to, all my sources say that this is accurate. Quote, he says, I heard last year from 3 different people familiar with goings on at Ubisoft. Again, this is verified, and they've shown it through time and time again, correct predictions that these people that he's referencing know what they're talking about. He says, I heard from 3 different people that the next big Assassin's Creed would be set in ancient Egypt. Now, mind you, he didn't put this out in an article before this. This was something he only brought up once this 4chan poster mentioned this. So he says, yes, I've had these people telling me in private, independently for months that it's set in ancient Egypt. So either they're all lying and it just was really lucky, or it's true. Now he says, since this morning, and again, this was written at 2 in the afternoon. This stuff was really publicized the morning of January 4th. So it's a little convoluted, but he says, since this morning, 2 other independent sources have contacted me to corroborate that specifically the game was set in ancient Egypt. He says, quote, I heard about the codename Empire from 2 of those sources. 3 of them told me the game would indeed launch in 2017. Months ago, one source told me the game would also take place in ancient Rome, although that may have changed. And it's important to note that the 4chan poster says that some sections have been removed from the game. As I said with the section in Greece, it seems like they cut those because it wasn't doable. It was too ambitious, and they probably realized that people would want to do that as a standalone game, so they kind of pushed it aside. So main point being, Kotaku verified all of this, and with their independent sources that also claimed that the game was set in ancient Egypt, they said that it was codename Empire. So when people say, I've seen multiple videos on this where people say that, oh, well, perhaps this codename Empire means codename, like the Empire references the Mongol Empire or some sort of Japanese Empire, or maybe it's like over. That's not how it works. The people who coined the term codename Empire, that said it was codenamed Empire, are the same people that said it was set in ancient Egypt. So you can't just reassign the meaning of the word. The people who coined the term said it was Egypt. So it's either all Egypt, it is Empire, or none of it's true. Now, we, of course, haven't heard anything about this past this point. There hasn't really been many new developments since this 4chan poster. So we don't know what the stage of development is. We don't know if it's being delayed, if they're pushing it back. But they have had quite a while to work on this game. And with their current development cycle, they would line up really nicely with E3 this year to announce it, to show it off, and then to launch it this fall. As people at the higher echelons of Ubisoft management have said, they're interested in doing the sort of Fallout 4 style release schedule. They said, and I believe I'm quoting, "We really like the way that works." And so essentially they would announce it at E3 and then they would launch it November, December, sometime in there. So hopefully this gives you some access, some idea of where all of these claims come from. I know it certainly helped me, and there's a lot of really interesting things in this 4chan post that hasn't really been talked about. So next time you hear somebody saying maybe codename Empire references the Mongol Empire, you now know that's BS, because it can't possibly be that unless all of this stuff is fake. So either all of it's true or none of it's true. And Assassin's Creed codename Empire, according to all of these sources, is set in ancient Egypt. It's going to be bigger, 3 times bigger than Black Flag, more colorful, new animations, completely from scratch. It's going to have so much polish on it after a year of essentially polish, nothing but, starting in alpha a year before release. It's going to be great. And I really hope that we get it this year. Basically, this fall, nobody's going to sleep. It's going to be so great. We're going to have Red Dead Redemption 2. We're going to have this, like, our lives are going to be over, and I cannot wait for that to happen. But let me know what you think down below. I read all the comments. I really do appreciate it when you guys get engaged. If I missed anything or wasn't clear about something, it's very likely. So leave those comments down below, and I can do any corrections. But thank you for watching. I love you all. Peace out. Hey, did you like that? Well, that was just an extra of the full show that I do every weekend. So if you haven't seen it already, make sure to check it out. Ad card things popping up everywhere. And subscribe if you haven't already.